Almost 30 years ago, a delegation from Denver, Colorado visited Ontario's capital city to study its transit system. Such was this city's tremendous reputation on the transit file. Fast forward to 2017, and it's the Denver region that's got a world-class transit system and a regional economic development model to behold. Tom Clark was a member of that delegation way back when, and since then spent 14 years as CEO of the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation. He's now president of Collaborative Economic Development, a consulting firm in Colorado, and he's back in town, and we're eager to ask him for his updated impressions and maybe a little advice, too. Here's Tom Clark. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. You came to Toronto during the 1990s to learn about transit from us, and I wonder why you picked Toronto.
You had a great reputation to start with. Secondly, we were struggling to get what we thought getting cowboys out of cars into trains in Colorado. Everybody said no cowboys will ever get into that. And here's this great city. We walked in, with about 100 people with us to show you how interested we were. And we ended up with the catalytic experience, which sent us back to Denver to do what we're doing now.
And your biggest concern was somehow trying to figure out how to change the culture in Denver so that cowboys, as you put it, would get out of cars?
Yeah, we were very certain that people would not do that. You know, there was just too much of a bother. You had your truck, you had your car, it was sovereignty for you, and not exactly what we knew was going to happen.
So what was the answer to that problem?
The answer was those cowboys got out of the cars and out of their trucks and took their dogs into the kennels and came to work on transit. And they wanted trains primarily.
Was it the idea that if you build it, they will come?
The idea is that we were going to have to build it. We had been in a long-standing economic plan to become a global city, which you already were. And we said, well, if you're going to be a global city, you're going to have transit ultimately, and that's where we got started.
We want to just bring up a picture of what the TTC, Toronto Transit Commission subway map, looked like. There we go. That's what it looks like today. Line 1 in the yellow, line 2 in the green, a little bit up in Scarborough in blue, and then the Shepherd East line in the purple in the top right-hand corner. Now we're going to look at Denver's. You got a lot going on there, Tom.
No subways, though.
No subways, but you know, quite the tentacles on that map. You started building something that you called fast tracks. What was that, and when did you start building it?
Well, in Colorado, any tax increase has to be put to the voters. In 1997, we went to the voters with a great plan for transit, and we got beat 57% to 43%.
They weren't there yet.
Hence, we come to Toronto. We came back again. It took us 7 years to get ready to go again. And the big change for us was that we had a map that actually meant things to people. And we would go to like some summer fair or something, and we had these T-shirts on, and they had that map on it. And you'd have people come up and poke you in the chest and say, my house is right there. I'm going to be close to transit. So
they felt a connection to it.
Yeah, that they were actually going to be able to use it. And then the other people said, this is going to be great because this will get other people off the road so I can drive.
Now, what percentage of it is, you told us no subways, but what percentage is sort of light rail, what percentage is, take us through it.
All of it's light rail right now, except for what we call the air train. And part of the promise when we passed the commitment to building the world's largest airport at that time, Denver International Airport, the first question people said, are you going to have a train? And we have a commuter rail now that runs every 30 minutes back and forth from downtown.
Is it impossible to build subways in Denver because you're a mile up in the air?
No, it's not an issue about atmospheric activity. It's more just a function of cost. We have a lot more land.
And pretty thick mountains, too.
Yeah, those darn mountains, they're great to ski, but they're hard to get through.
Hard to blast through, right on. Okay, let's read this. This is from a few years ago in citylab.com. By 2018, when all but one of the 10 fast-track lines should be completed, a metropolitan area with a projected population of 3 million, spread out over 2,340 square miles, will be served by 9 rail lines, 18 miles of bus rapid transit, and 95 stations. Many argue it will turn Denver into the West's most advanced transit city, vaulting it beyond better-known peers Portland, Los Angeles, and Vancouver, British Columbia. We have, in the capital city of the province of Ontario, been unable to build a one-stop subway for a very long time, despite the fact that there is a lot of political momentum behind it because, well, it's turned into a massive political football. How did you manage to get so much built in a relatively short space of time?
Well, first of all, the trackage ran along existing railroad or highways, so the public felt good about that. They knew they could kind of watch it. And the Southeast line was the first one that was in very heavy traffic, and people drove by every day and saw that train going back and forth, and they're jammed in traffic. And I said, this is a great idea. But if you look at the trackage that we have laid out there, is that almost every single quadrant of the region had a piece, and we could start quickly. We had money ready to go.
Where'd the money come from?
The money came from the feds, of course, from FTA, but it also came from sales tax. And the Regional Transportation District is a creature of the state, but they were given an allocation of how much that could be, that slice of the sales tax region-wide. And they wanted to go to the max, which was the election that we had in 2003. How
predictable was your national funding for transportation projects? I ask the question this way because in Canada, the federal government will fund transit projects, but sort of on a one-off basis. Oh, you need something for that subway? Okay, we'll think about it. But there's no sort of predictable annual flow of money for transit.
That's the same that we were struggling with.
You've had a chance to, obviously you were in Toronto all those decades ago, and now you're back now. Do you have a view? I know nobody wants to come into somebody else's city and say, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, but you must have a view on why this city somehow hasn't kept up. What's the view?
Well, I think I can only speak for us. I've heard that from the folks we've been talking to the last day or so. We tried to create a culture in metropolitan Denver that everybody gets a piece of something that's good. And that's a conversation that goes beyond elected officials. For years, we've had a thing called the Metro Mayor Caucus, and that's all the regions' mayors of all the cities, whether you're Foxfield with 200 people or the city of Denver with 700,000 people.
And you've got tons of little local municipalities there, don't you?
And
what do you got, like 59 or 60 or something altogether?
Yeah, about over 60, but the ones that play are about 38 or 39.
Okay.
But there's the guy in Foxfield and the guy sitting in the chair in Denver each get one vote. It's totally egalitarian. It's a non-governmental organization. They meet every month, and their big challenge was fast tracks. How can we make this work? How can we do this without shooting each other or fighting over stations and what have you? And there's a lot of horse trading that went on, but it didn't have to be something that gave comeuppance or having a dominant role like the city of Denver. And we were blessed with a whole, again at that time, a very group of regional-looking mayors that said, let's do this, let's do this. Well, I'll put that down for a little while, and then if you will do this for me. And
that's how you get political buy-in.
Yeah, and the public loved them. The governor was opposed to the fast tracks. He wanted to go to buses, and the Metro Mayor's Caucus vetoed him. At that time, 33 mayors and one governor, and they won 33-1.
Well, 33-1 usually wins the day, doesn't
it? Well, if you get 57% of the vote, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, let's do a little comparison of our two regions here to get a sense about how we stack up against one another. We're going to look at the vast area. Let's bring this up, Sheldon. Here's the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation. So that's a pretty broad swath there. Mm-hmm. And now let's look at what we call here the Greater Toronto Area. And that's us right there. And that's also a pretty broad swath.
Sure is.
And we're going to look at the numbers now and do the comparisons. If we go region by region, Toronto, we're looking at 7,000 plus square kilometers. Denver, nearly 29,000 square kilometers, so you're a lot bigger. But how about in population? We're twice as big in population. And municipalities in each region? We've only got 25. You had 68. 68. It's knowing what I know about how difficult it is to get our 25 to work together. I cannot imagine how you managed to get 68 different political geniuses, all of whom think they ought to be number one, working together.
We didn't start out at transit. We started out with a really, really bad economy. 1983, we had the oil bust, the worst economic calamity other than the Great Depression. The whole region was just in collapse, and everybody was going, your fault, your fault, your fault. And we said, well, we're not going to do this. We're not going to get out of this if we don't get together, because we are a small region, I mean, population-wise, and we're going to have to do this together. We created the Metro Denver EDC, got new jobs in. We were the second most polluted city in the U.S. behind Los Angeles. We were terrible, and no prospects. We were a resource-based economy, and we said we got to be serious about this. We've got to bring all that together, and everybody has to have a place at the table. So we started out with a document called the Articles of Cooperation, and it just simply said, here's what everybody gets to do. And we had a big signature deal that fighting mayors from Mayor of Denver against the Mayor of Aurora. And then we got all the cities to sign in and all the economic development groups. And then we, of course, had to have a code of conduct called the Metro Denver Code of Ethics, which says, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And
they followed it?
Yeah, have done it that way for over 35 years now. Had 3 trials, all three entities got found guilty, and they're not doing it anymore.
One of the difficulties I think that the City of Toronto has had is that we have a council of 45 people, and the mayor is just 1 vote out of 45. He doesn't have a veto over anything, nothing like that. It's I guess they call it the weak mayor system. Do you have that, or do you have a strong mayor system where the mayor can veto a council decision?
The 2 largest cities in the Metro District and in metropolitan Denver are the City of Denver and the City of Aurora, and they both have strong mayors who can veto.
And did that help get stuff built that you needed to get built?
Didn't have to use it.
Never came to that?
No.
Huh.
And in the Metro Mayor's Caucus, with all these mayors sitting around, there's only 1 veto in there, and that goes to the City of Denver. That's been around for 28 years. It's never once been exercised. There's a real sense of we are always in this together.
Okay, let's move on to this. I want to read this from, again, citylab.com. It's a beautiful vision if one undermined by an uncomfortable truth. Denver's mode share for transit, the proportion of people who use buses or light rail to commute, is only about 6%. Contrast this with the Canadian city of Calgary, where a similarly sized bus and light rail fleet operating in a similarly dispersed landscape draws in a mode share of nearly 17%. Even epically sprawled Atlanta and automobile-mad Los Angeles managed to achieve almost twice Denver's per capita transit ridership. In spite of all the inducements, Denverites, like 8 in 10 Americans, continue to get to school or work the same old way, driving alone. If this system is as great as you say it is, why aren't more people using it?
Well, as they say it very well, we're quite dispersed, and part of this strategy was all about transit-oriented projects, development projects. And we are now seeing that build out, firing up and adding a lot of additional residential units around those stops right now. That will bring it up to some higher number of people taking it. And the biggest change we saw was the decision on the parts of companies to move towards stations. In lower downtown in Denver, we had a Fortune 500 company come in and moved out of California, and they have 85% of their employees live on transit or adjacent to it and bring it in. They had a garage for 285 cars with and about 2,000 people in the building, and half of that parking garage has got file cabinets in it and stuff. Cause
empty, eh?
Yeah.
They don't need it.
And that was really kind of proving the point for us. And then in the Southeast District, we see the same thing going on. Employers huddling around transit stops now, and we expect that we'll see a significant uptick.
Okay, making progress there, but driverless cars are coming. Uber and Lyft are going to get in there more. So is that going to take away from the progress?
That is the Rubik's Cube that we're all playing with right now, and I'm not sure if we have all the cubes. But what we do know is that if you can meld those two together, you can make it more successful. But I'll give you an example. Our staff, young staff, was 6 blocks to walk to the last mile issue or the first mile to a station. They just jump in Uber and go to their apartments, which is 6 blocks away from the station. Now, if you can meld those two and get a combined fee for that, you can get people that opportunity to use both together. And I have that dream of, I live near the 118th Avenue station. The day that I'll be able to just hit on my phone, I'll get a little car show up, pull into my little suburban cul-de-sac, and I'll get in and they'll say, "Good morning, Mr. Clark. We're 8 minutes away from the station. The train is on time. We have somebody in between the two of us. If you'd like to let that person drive with you, you'll get half a fee." And I go, "No, I'm not going to. I'm going all by myself."
You're still a cowboy too, eh? Out there all by yourself on the roads. Well, we showed you the map of what the subway system in Ontario's capital city looked like a little earlier. Sheldon, let's bring up the next map here. This is what they hope it will look like many years down the road. We're obviously, I was going to say, a million miles away from that. It's not a million miles away, but it's a long way away.
Are you billions of dollars away?
Oh, yeah, billions. Yeah. Easily billions. Tens of billions of dollars away. The question is, you got any advice for us on how to get from where we are to that picture?
First of all, that's kind of what we saw in 1998. This was the dream that we saw and the dream that we envisioned. For us, we really had to take what we had done and change the way in which we did economic development. We had to take that model and bring it into transit, in which everybody had a sense of having a say and everybody got paid one way or another. I'm not sure, having listened to the structural issues here in terms of governance, which seem to be, to me, a little murky in terms of how that gets done.
Well, we got 100,000 people moving into Toronto every year. So that map that you just saw needs to happen, or they're all going to be bumping into each other all the time.
We get 1,000 a month, and I think that's a lot.
Tom, it's good of you to visit us at TVO tonight. That's Tom Clark, now with Collaborative Economic Development, once upon a time the CEO of the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.